Hi, I'm Christine Kopr with Sotheby's Realty in Vancouver, BC. We're going to take a look at September's numbers now that they're in. And boy, oh boy, there are some shifts coming. However, not every market segment is affected by today's market circumstances as you may think. So stick with me and you're going to learn a little bit more about some of the details out there, especially if you're thinking about West Side detached or even East Side condos. As you know, every month I like to start off with a global look over the real estate market for the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver. This encompasses the market from Whistler all the way out to Maple Ridge. So remember, this is just an overview of how the market is doing, which always tends to give us an idea of what trends we should be looking for. If you have a specific property in mind that you're thinking about buying or selling, we need to look more granular and deeper into your particular market segment. Later on, when we're going to take a look at the stats, you'll understand why. And if you'd like to get more information, even more specific down to your neighborhood and product type, please reach out to me. I love being able to put together this information and consult with my clients. So here are the stats for the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver ending September 2023. What you can see here at the top in yellow, these are the interest rate increases. We did have a hold in September. There was no rate increase. However, we did have a couple of rate increases back here in June and July. And the reason I'm bringing it up now is there's a trend that's showing up right now, which as we get into November, take a look back at October, we're going to see if some things are tying in the way they did last year in the fall. So sales in September, we ended up with just under 2,000 sales at 1926. That's down 16% month over month, but still up year over year. However, about 26% below the 10-year average. So in terms of the overall history and demand in the marketplace, we are relatively low in terms of demand for this time of year. However, much better than last year by double digits, but we are starting to see that sales are slowing down in September. And initially you would think that September would be a busier month historically over August, for example, when most people go away on vacation and aren't really in the marketplace. However, it is not uncommon for September sales to sometimes dip a little bit because we're coming out of that vacation mode, getting into back to school mode, and people are just busy in the beginning of September. In the last 5 years, it's actually been a trend. And what we want to see is increased sales heading into October. That's going to be an indicator of what's to come for this fall, especially since last year we saw lowered sales, particularly after having subsequent interest rate increases, which we haven't had until this summer. And it always takes some time for these market influencers to work their way in and to affect the market. And so what everybody's wondering right now is, are the last two rate increases going to impact the market this fall and perhaps into early next year based on what we saw happen last year? Because if you've been following me, you'll know that last year in the fall, we started to see price decreases. Sales are doing okay. They're under 2,000. We'd like to see them a little bit higher. All in all, we're doing all right, and we want to see what happens next. New listings, we have 5,446 new listings come on in the month of September. That's 38% more than the month before. That makes sense. Everyone's on holidays in August. And it's also up 29% year over year. So we're starting to see a little bit more inventory coming onto the market this particular fall. And this is also 5% above the 10-year average. So we're starting to see a little bit more listings than we're used to, which in the context, in the grand scheme of things, we need based on the demand that we have seen in the marketplace this spring. Anyhow, we needed a little bit more inventory because our inventory so far has been at historic lows, our overall inventory, the supply, which we're going to look at next. So where are we with supply? The total active listings, the amount of homes that are on the market right now that are available for purchase is 11,382 homes. That's up about 13% month over month from August. And it's also up 15% year over year. But we are 6% below the 10-year average in terms of the amount of listings available for sale over the 10-year average, which really helps because we've had some very interesting things happen over the last 10 years, from a crazy market in 2015, 2016, lowish interest rates back then. And then, of course, we had the stress test come in, and we've had foreign buyers ban taxes and over like within BC. And then, of course, across the country, we've had COVID, we've had historically low interest rates. So, the 10-year average kind of gives you a good idea of like, how do we fit in taking all of those wild extremes into account? My favorite number for this more global look over the marketplace is months of inventory. So for those of you that follow me, you know that I love months of inventory. I think it's a very good indicator of what's to come once we start to see the trend. 1 month doesn't make a market. You need to see, a sustained number pace to start to see which way the market is going. And we're currently sitting at 5.9 months of inventory. So almost 6 months of inventory. So just a quick moment on how months of inventory works. If we continue to sell 1,900 homes every single month and our supply didn't increase, so no one else listed a home, and we continue to have 11,000 homes available for sale, it would take us almost 6 months to sell through all the available inventory. That's how you arrive at months of inventory. Generally speaking, 6 months and above of inventory, so more than 6 months of inventory, is considered a buyer's market. There is more inventory than there is for the current demand on that inventory. Between 4 and 6 months of inventory is considered a balanced market, a market that doesn't favor the buyers or the sellers. And generally speaking, markets react pretty quickly. While the real estate market is slower, things tend to change to extremes in the marketplace. So balanced markets don't tend to hang around very long. They tend to be the transition. 4 months and below of inventory is considered a seller's market. Think about it. There's only 1, 2, or 3 months of inventory available for that current demand that's out there. So that puts pressure on prices. If you can recall, when you can get a car or a Tesla or whatnot, there was just no available inventory, and we saw prices increasing. We're sitting at about that 6 months of inventory, and you can see the trend. The January is always a kind of a wacky month because we're coming out of the holiday season. Things are slow and inventories there carried over from the year before. And then we get going, and you can see very quickly this spring, we were sitting in a seller's market in terms of less than 4 months of inventory right here. And a large part of that is we had some very good demand, over 2,000 sales every month, partly due to the fact that we had very low inventory. We had historic low inventory. Look at these numbers, just under 8,000 to 9,000 homes available on the market. So there's not a lot of supply out there, and this is historically low compared for this type of demand, which has actually been below the 10-year average all this year. This spring, inventory has helped prop up prices because there was a demand and there just was not a lot of inventory. Now we're starting to see a slow climb in inventory, and potentially we could be seeing a slower trend in sales as we head into the fall. Spring is naturally the most active time of the marketplace, the fall being the second most active market. However, we do like to still see some decent sales throughout October and November. And depending on if that demand continues, that in comparison to how much more supply starts to come on, because we're starting to see a little bit more supply coming on, we might start to see even more downward pressure on prices because of rising inventory coupled with a lower demand in sales. And what you can see that's starting to show up in the benchmark. Now, 1 or 2 months doesn't make a trend, but we're starting to be on the cusp once we get through October to see if perhaps we're going to see more downward pressure on prices, because over the last couple of months, we have seen a decrease in the benchmark price. So as you can see here, September's benchmark price is sitting at 1.203. That's down from 1.208. Marginal, just a 0.4% decrease month over month. And I also like to point out that we've actually had a 4.9% 1% increase or 4.2% increase since the beginning of this year. So the spring of this year was actually extremely resilient. Remember, we went through significant interest rate increases last year. Nobody thought that the market was going to perform as well as it did. So I'm very shy to make very quick predictions. However, interest rates are a lot higher than they were last year. And we did have some reprieve in interest rates in the spring. That has since changed. And I think it's starting to show up in the marketplace. This slide here just gives you an overall look of the real estate market going back all the way to 1977 for the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver. And so while there has been a thing called the Great Global Financial Crisis and COVID and all the things that we have gone through over time, the trend has been your friend, but that does not mean that we do not go through these peaks and valleys. And you can see this here even from last year, just the impact of the interest rates on prices, but also how well we've recovered or sustained some of those prices since those interest rate increases. So the market actually has been quite resilient. So market drivers right now, what's driving the market? It's always four things. It's consumer confidence. What's the psychology in the marketplace? And are people wanting to spend their money? So a couple things with consumer confidence, we're going to take a look at that in terms of sales. People are still spending money in terms of retail sales. However, we are starting to get more and more negative media out there about interest rates and the economy. There's a lot of market participants who are suggesting that we are on the cusp of a recession. So that starts to impact the way that the buyers feel. We are seeing less multiple offers, and we're starting to see, less sales. So we'll see what happens with that. But there is this shift. Again, we've had 2 months of the MLS benchmark taking off a little bit, which encompasses not just Metro Vancouver or Vancouver West and East, but goes all the way out, like I said, from Whistler to Maple Ridge. And we're starting to see a little bit of a trend, and be interesting to see where that goes this fall. My guess is we're probably going to see some downward pressure on prices, and especially because of inflation and the economic situation. Jobs numbers came out stronger than expected yesterday. Inflation is still high, although the economy is showing signs of slowing. So the reason why this is important is because it's very impactful on the Bank of Canada and what they're going to do with interest rates. And speaking of interest rates, it's probably the number one thing impacting the market at this point in time. We had a hold on any rate increases from the Bank of Canada earlier in September. The next announcement is October 25th, and they're going to take a look at all of the market drivers and information out there to make a decision as to which way to go. We did have strong job numbers just yesterday on the cusp of their meeting, and we'll take a look at some of the other information out there with respect to inflation, et cetera, in the coming slides. So there's a strong chance that we could see another interest rate increase. And of course, that is really starting to make things painful out there in the marketplace. You're starting to see people having to qualify at 8% or plus, even though their rates are slightly lower. And that is drastically different than earlier this year in the spring, particularly because the bond market has also gone a little bit wild. And the Bank of Canada determines your variable interest rate mortgage rates or your line of credit rate, anything that fluctuates. But if you're somebody who wants to purchase a 3-year or a 5-year fixed term mortgage, the bond market influences that. And the bond market has been going a little bit wild over the last several weeks, really pushing those fixed rates, whereas they were sitting at about the high 4s earlier in the spring. So substantially different between now and the spring. The saving grace so far has been that we've had very low inventory in the spring and very low inventory overall, and in comparison to the demand in the marketplace. So we're also going to have to keep a tight eye on inventory and see if more housing comes into the marketplace. Here you can just see some of the information with respect to these drivers. They are the things that are going to impact our rates because they influence the Bank of Canada and the bond market. So you can see here retail sales are stronger than they were prior to COVID. People are still spending money. Inflation, you can see here, these are all the different measures of inflation. They're all higher than this dashed line, which is the 2% target. And as long as they stay in this territory, that actually does incentivize the Bank of Canada to increase mortgage rates, because it is the only tool that they have to try to slow down the economy. And if you're wondering what that means, it means that people stop spending money. And people stop spending money generally when they can't afford things like their mortgage payments, or they lose their jobs. And that's the part that is the scariest, is if the Bank of Canada pushes interest rates to a point where businesses aren't active because people aren't spending money, and then people start losing their jobs. That's the thing that we really don't want to see, because while we do want to tame inflation because it hurts everybody, recessions also hurt people when they lose their jobs. And none of that is really fun. So while we really want to see inflation come down, the Bank of Canada is trying to make this happen as best as they can without that occurring. And we shall see. We're very hopeful that they hold steady with their interest rate increases. However, it's probably wise to expect at least one, maybe two more rate increases. And then hopefully they'll be high enough that they're going to do the job and really slow the economy down. The shining light, however, is that while it takes time for these rate increases to make their way through the market, the economy is showing signs of slowing. So hopefully the Bank of Canada just keeps rates where they are, and they just allow them to work through the market over time to hopefully slowly have this broad change to the marketplace and not send the economy into a recession. And here you can see where our interest rates are sitting today. This is the bond market here. As you can see, it did spike. And here's a rate forecast, something to actually really consider if your mortgage is coming up for renewal in the next year or year and a half, to really start planning and thinking about what you may want to do. Because I think there was a lot of people who thought this spring that we would start to see decreasing interest rates early next year. And based on the way things are going, that is not looking likely at all at this time. It looks like rates need to stay higher for longer. They may not need to go higher from where they are today, but they very well might need to really slow things down and stop the inflation and get it under control. And even then, if they go up, they'll probably need to stay there. They're not going to just trend down the next month. So for anybody with a mortgage that's renewing in the near-term future, you may want to start thinking about a plan for when that time comes, because my guess is while hopefully in a year or two, we're not going to be sitting at the rates we are today, but it's very likely that we could be sitting in the ranges, in the fives, very possibly. And that can be a big shock for anybody who coming from a rate of say 1.8 or 1.09 in some cases, for those that got mortgages back in 2020, with the 5-year coming up in 2025. Despite all of that, the real estate market has surprised us like it did this spring. I'm Christine Kopr with Sotheby's Realty in Vancouver, BC. If you have any questions about your own personal situation, I would love to hear from you, and I welcome you to connect with me. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and my Instagram if you like information like this, and I look forward to hearing from you.